Hello, everyone, and welcome. Yes, I am Nick Rosenthal, professor and chair of the History Department, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this panel titled Strengthening LMU's Partnership with Indigenous Peoples. As the first order of business today, I'd like to offer LMU's land acknowledgement, which reads, as part of Loyola Marymount University's commitment to recognizing our history, location, and connection to the indigenous communities of Los Angeles, we acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional caretakers of Tovignar, the Los Angeles Basin, and the Southern Channel Islands, and the presence of LMU on their traditional, ancestral, and unceded land. We are grateful for this opportunity to live, learn, create, and build community in this place. Now, while we might begin any university event with a land acknowledgement, it is especially appropriate that we do so today, where the very idea of land acknowledgements will be a topic of discussion. But before we get there, I'd like to say a little bit about how this panel came together. This panel was organized by the Indigenous Working Group, a collaborative body of faculty, staff, and students dedicated to advancing Indigenous visibility, inclusion, and justice on campus. The IWG develops programming, resources, and policy recommendations that highlight Indigenous perspectives and address LMU's historical and ongoing relationship with Native communities, especially the Tongva people. Through efforts such as the Land Acknowledgement, Indigenous Heritage Month events, curriculum development, and campus space reimagination, the IWG works to indigenize LMU in alignment with its mission. For questions about the Indigenous Working Group, please contact me or IWG Chair Jared Coleman, Assistant Professor of Computer Science, and please visit our Native American and Indigenous Hub website and subscribe to our mailing list to keep up with upcoming events, important news, and opportunities. On behalf of the IWG, I'd like to thank LMU's CSJ Center for Reconciliation and Justice, and especially Michael McNaught, Assistant Director of Operations and Programming, for sponsoring our panel and providing space during this symposium titled Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor, Modeling the City of Tomorrow. There are many exciting and thought-provoking events going on throughout the symposium, so I hope you'll check out the schedule and attend a few more. Again, we thank the CSJ Center for providing us this space. Our event today, Strengthening LMU's Partnership with Indigenous Peoples, follows from one of the ongoing concerns and responsibilities of LMU's Indigenous Working Group. It seeks to engage Indigenous scholars and community members in a discussion about how LMU can work to center Indigenous perspectives and knowledge in ways that are community-driven and relationship-centered. The goal of our panel today is to learn with our Indigenous partners and build models for collaborative work to help guide our future efforts, as well as bolster our case for more institutional support. I'll begin by introducing the panelists. Then, as moderators, Professor Coleman and I will ask some questions of our panelists to begin the conversation. After a while, we'll invite the audience to join us by contributing their questions and comments. And we'll go until about 3:15. Then there'll still be some time to chat informally with our panelists. Serving as co-moderator today is Jared Coleman, a member of the Big Pine Paiute tribe of the Owens Valley and assistant professor of computer science here at LMU. Professor Coleman is also the chair of LMU's Indigenous Working Group. He leads the Kobishi Research Group, and his work includes artificial intelligence, distributed systems, IoT, and large language models. Specifically, Professor Coleman studies artificial intelligence for Indigenous language revitalization, and he has developed an online dictionary for Owens Valley Paiute. Professor Coleman and I are pleased to welcome to campus Christina Conley, a member of the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California and a descendant of the first peoples of the land on which LMU now sits. Ms. Connolly has served as a tribal council board member and works as a tribal cultural resource administrator. Since 2015, she has served as a Native American cultural research consultant and monitor with numerous groups, including California State Parks, Coastal Conservancy, Caltrans, Amtrak, Metro, Southern California Edison, West Los Angeles Veterans Administration, Los Angeles Public Works, LADWP, and all major city agencies within the Gabrielino Tongva territory. We are also happy to have with us Edgar Perez, a member and tribal historian for the Gabrielino Tongva Nation. Mr. Perez is a former two-term tribal council member, and since 1995, he has worked as a cultural resource monitor at numerous sites, including the Metropolitan Water District headquarters, Alameda Corridor Railway Project, and CSU campuses. As a tribal historian, he has given many talks and presentations on Tongva history for community organizations, schools, and universities, including, on several occasions, LMU. Mr. Perez is also the author of the Introduction to the Gabrielino Tongva Bibliography, published by the LMU Library in 2022. And we are delighted to welcome to campus Kelly Stewart, who is Gabrielino Tongva and Paiute or Luiseño. Dr. Stewart is an assistant professor of American Indian Studies at CSU Long Beach and chancellor's postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Education and the American Indian Studies Center at UCLA. Her research examines the legacies of Indian boarding schools, land tenure, and public education in California. Dr. Stewart also serves as co-principal investigator of Remembering, Restoring, Reclaiming, a community-based examination of land tenure and public education across California, a multi-year initiative grounded in archival research, community partnerships, and Indigenous student membership. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Okay, and I'm going to invite Dr. Coleman to ask the first question, please.
All right. LMU's, this symposium is being sponsored, no.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah, okay. I lost my place in the question list we have. This symposium is being sponsored by the CSJ Center for Reconciliation and Justice. For many people, the connection between Indigenous issues and the need for reconciliation and justice is obvious, just based on a general sense of US history. But as both a university and a Catholic university, do you think LMU has a particular obligation or role to play in working with Indigenous communities towards reconciliation and restorative justice?
Who wants to be the first to tackle that weighty question?
Mi ha awashkuneha natanwanyane Christina Conley, Honukpadam, Noam ki Guashna, Koi Tovangar, Neshune Machuvaha. I am Christina Conley, and that is a Tongva welcoming you to our ancestral village site of Guashna. That is right here. And I'm a direct lineal descendant of that. And we welcome you to our land that we all share. And I think to answer this question, I want to make it more unification rather than vilification. And I want to start off the tone. Edwin Walker was an archaeologist. And in 1952, he wrote this in the preface of his book. Okay, this is going to give us some context. 1952. Until recently, it would not have been considered worthwhile to conduct archaeological excavations in Southern California, as its former Indian inhabitants were regarded as having no culture worthy of the name. And look where we are right now. We're able to have this meaningful conversation with you, and we've come a long way. And I think the trajectory is there. Edgar, I'm sure, has plenty of substance to back that up. And as a LMU being an educational institution on our site, not only was it a village site, but it was also a cemetery. And I think that it's important that LMU takes a bold stance in that life didn't start with the Spaniards. And nearly all history books will talk about California history as starting with the Spaniards. It was not true. Our ancestors were here since time immemorial, and that needs to be continually expressed because we face erasure all the time. And what a great place to highlight that we're still here in Guashna. I did visit the archives recently, and that's a great opportunity for context. And as a learning institution, students should be able to go back into the archives and find out more than just one file on the memorial. They should be able to know the ancestors that are the why we would do a memorial and where are we now? We're still here. So that's where I believe that not only being an educational institution, you're on a great site.
Just make sure. I like to turn it off because I'll make little motions and don't want it to come on the mic. A little bit, I'm Kelly Stewart. A little bit about me. In that long description of all the research I do, my primary research is actually on Catholic mission Indian boarding schools in Southern California. So I specifically researched St. Boniface Indian Industrial School, which was a Catholic school out in Banning, so like way before you get to Palm Springs. And my family had what I've traced so far, based off of the records I've gotten access to. I have, through blood and marriage, 33 people who went to that school. And at any given time, my family had the most students, and my two great uncles, Emmanuel and Paul, were they were um, part of the first 125 students in 1890 when that school opened. My great grandfather attended the school there. I was born and raised in the city of La Puente, which is predominantly Hispanic, and I grew up very Catholic. We went to church every Sunday. And I think very early on, I started questioning why and how my family became Catholic. And it didn't, I'm very old. I'm going to be 45 this year. So I look way younger than I am. But it was about 10 years ago that when I was doing my master's thesis, every relative that I interviewed, I asked them, why are we Catholic? And I think the best response was from my auntie was, because we've always been. And so I share that because it's really important in situating the work that I do, because during that same time, one of the things I did was reach out to the Archdiocese in San Bernardino and ask for records, or like to get access to them. I'm a master's student. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so the response was, I thought I was writing a letter to the BIA for a blood degree, because it was like, you have to show descendancy from every single person that you're trying to get a record for. You have to pay for every single box that's going to be pulled and every single copy. And so it made me, and it comes through in my thesis, was very, I'm somebody who just uses what's on my mind. I was pissed because those are my family records that were part of the church archive. So it really set me on this path of, I became a force of reckoning. I was like, I'm gonna get the church. But as I've grown, it's less about the church and more about the power that they have. And I think when we're looking at colonization here in California, it's often separated the Spanish and the church. They are one and the same. They were not separate. Everything is still here today is a result of that union. And I think as somebody who's done the research but also has denied it, I see a lot of movement, and I think it's really great. There's a lot of holy orders are trying to do, especially with boarding schools, to figure out how to release the records. And it's really, really complicated. And but I think that there's a moral obligation to work with the descendants who, because for whatever reason, my family, and not just me through academic research, but my cousins from a branch of my family are doing work to protect the cemetery of, that's all that's left of that school. And so my family has this really deep tie to this school and to these lands, which again, my family's from way eastern part of Tongva territory. And so I think the university and the church can work together to help people I'm not just saying me, but people like me who are asking these questions, because I get a lot of emails and I don't always have a lot of time to reply. And I don't have the records to say, oh, yeah, your grandma went to school on this date. So I think there's a moral obligation to answer those questions for people, because um, it's going to fill this emptiness that's in them.
Yeah, that is hello in Tongva. Thank you, Dr. Rosenthal, for inviting me important symposium. And thank you, students, for attending this brief but important talk. I had started a small business in Pasadena and doing video and production services. Did that for a few years. One day, my cousin came to me and said, I need for you to help me on a project. And I thought it was going to be involving photography or or documenting something on videotape. As it turned out, he took me to a burial site, a cemetery, a Tongva cemetery that was disturbed during construction excavation of the Department of Water and Metropolitan Department of Water and Power headquarters in downtown Los Angeles by Union Station. So I thought I was going to document the construction site, but then I met a group of archaeologists I was introduced to, and they said, "You're going to be the monitor of of the archaeology team in taking care of scientifically removing all of the burial sites." And of course, I was shocked. I had nothing. I had no experience in that, but the person who asked me to do that was what was termed the most likely descendant of our tribe, the Gabrielino Tongva. And since then, I've been involved with monitoring archaeology sites. So my discussion this afternoon will be basically on burial sites here in Los Angeles County, specifically Gabrielino Tongva sites. And so that'll be part of my discussion this afternoon.
Thanks to all of you for that. I think there's a lot clearly that LMU can do, right, to address to these issues, and that's part of the ongoing work of the Indigenous Working Group and sessions like this to work together towards those ends. And I wanted to circle back to the issue of land acknowledgement, because I think that's become a more common practice, and something that maybe, as many students here are becoming familiar with, hearing these land acknowledgements. And that's one of the first things that the Indigenous Working Group was able to do, was to develop a land acknowledgement that's now used at a lot of major university events. And we saw that as an important first step for the university to acknowledge Indigenous issues. But now that this has become a common practice, I wanted to ask all of you, what you think about land acknowledgements. Are land acknowledgements important to do? There's also a critique that they can kind of become empty gestures at the same time, or that that institutions do them, but then don't always move beyond them. So I wanted to ask all of you how you feel about land acknowledgements. Are they important, and how can they be leveraged to encourage more substantial change?
I was involved in creating the land acknowledgement for the County of Los Angeles, amongst other agencies and institutions. They are meaningful when they're properly laid out. So again, if it's scolding, boy, does it set a different tone. It sets a tone of anger rather than education and enlightenment. My daughter's graduation at a university out of state, she graduated from the nursing school. Pretty great accomplishment. That land acknowledgement had accompanying video and music and all of this other stuff. And it eclipsed a very joyous event and made it very dark. And I was sad that made me really sad. They had an opportunity to say, hey, guess what? Here's a little bit of fun facts about the land that you're on, and enlighten people, but it became dark. Is it important? I think it's important because now we're actually talking about what there was First Peoples here. In my work, I interview a lot of people, and interviewing a woman who grew up in Malibu, 72 years old, never knew there was a tribe here. What did she know? She knows what 85% of people learn their history from a movie and now social media. So it's not accurate because they don't read books, so they don't know. And so this is kind of a touch point, I believe, to a discussion. So is it important? Yes, but it can be abused as well. And then it has no validity. And to quote Shakespeare in Hamlet, words, words, words. Because words only mean something if there's action behind it and intent behind it. And I figured that probably one of the kids here is going to ask about Billie Eilish. And to me, that was words, words, words. There was no interest. It made her feel good. Well, my opinion makes people feel good for the moment. But once they leave that podium, they're not doing anything about it. So there's no action behind it. And that's a little, it objectifies who we are. And then we're back to actually not even square one. We're behind square one.
I have deep reservations about land acknowledgements. This is an ongoing discussion between my sister, who's a faculty at UCLA in American Indian Studies. She wrote an article called Beyond Land Acknowledgement. And so I had the pleasure of copy editing it and making little comments about, like, are you sure about this? And it got published. It's fantastic. You can look it up. And I don't give land acknowledgements and I don't do welcomes. And there's a lot of reasons behind it. Part of it is, I think for me, when a person of the land is asked to give an acknowledgement or a welcome, there's not often the understanding that hidden within that request is asking that person to relive generations of trauma, to acknowledge lands that we acknowledge every single day. And I'm actually going to I caved and I'm going to give my first land acknowledgement ever at the American Education Research Association conference. And I've been drafting one for a year because I'm like, someone's going to get me to do it. Someone's going to get me to do it. The AERA conference is like the biggest education research association conference in the country. It's even international and it's here in LA. And so as we're drafting that, I've been thinking, like, what do I want people to know about the lands? But more importantly, how can I get them to move beyond a land acknowledgement? Because I've seen them at, both the campuses that I work with, that they were crafted with community. They're very intentional. But I also suspect they were run through the legal department because there are no obligations, there are no commitments to the community. And I think that undermines the idea of reconciliation because you can't reconcile with people who you were never friends with. So I learned that from an elder like 10 years ago. But in moving towards some type of reconciliation, the first step in that is saying, I'm sorry, sincerely, I'm sorry, but not just saying, I'm sorry for, and no, but blah, 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 blah. Just, I'm sorry this happened. And it also, because they're worded so carefully, and it's not just university, it's any institution, they result in absolution without any commitment. And yeah, they need to point towards action, point towards change and accountability. And I think without that, they can be hollow. And I do want to say, because it sounds really negative, they are a great starting point because I have experienced uh, blew up into a whole thing. There was someone on my campus had a land acknowledgement that had a reference to some a link that someone didn't like on campus. And my response, I got told, you need to talk to them. And I'm like, it's not my responsibility to talk to that person. I actually commend people who take the time to sit down and say, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement, but I'm not going to read the one. I'll take little parts of it, but I'm going to pause and reflect on what does it mean for me as a visitor in this place, whether it's here or across the world, as a visitor in this place. What does it mean to be in relation with the people in the land and to acknowledge that from a place of privilege? And so I commend people who do that. Don't just not put thought into it.
Thank you. I think it's really fascinating, Christina and Kelly. You have slightly different perspectives on land acknowledgements, but I think you both get to the point where land acknowledgements are a starting point and need to be a little bit more clear that they're not the end point, that they lead to change and action and further education. Edgar, you may have some things to say about land acknowledgements, but I also wanted to ask you maybe to talk a little bit about one thing you and I have talked about before is how when you've worked as a monitor on sites, you've also worked to have some signage on those sites that might not have otherwise been there, like at the DWP building downtown, I believe. And I wonder if you could talk about why that was important to you, that these sites where you monitor that they include some signage after you've kind of finished your work.
Land acknowledgement's has been around for quite a while from across the country. It's an important start, but as uh, mentioned, there's got to be something to action behind it, just not just a statement. So the that particular cemetery that was disturbed in downtown Los Angeles, the management of that particular headquarters decided to have a repatriation of those burials, of those remains, that is, to rebury them right on their property. They gave us that opportunity, and that's the best. That's one good example of how institutions and corporations help us in taking action regarding land acknowledgement. They paid for all of the digging of the graveyard. They also provided a monument to us, acknowledging that they were an integral part of the community. Another similar land acknowledgement that was done was by the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority, a federal project along with the state that lowered the railroad tracks on Alameda from Compton, city of Compton, coming north to downtown LA. And there was a burial site that I monitored in the city of Linwood. That company and also the federal agency principal contractors decided to help us in the repatriation of those burials. They provided a plot for us, a graveyard. That was another example of acknowledgement by a federal and a state government project. At Loyola, the action of the land acknowledgement is been here for a while. You know, the monument here on campus,
Tongva Memorial.
the memorial, and the very minimal, if I may say that, of the display of the monument at University Hall. A family of mine, the Valenzuela family, and so that's a start here at Loyola. But I'll have to hit you with a much better action to take later. Okay?
Sure, absolutely. Jared, do you want to maybe ask about campus spaces? Or?
Yeah, actually, I think that was a good segue into campus spaces. So since the 1990s, the Tongva Memorial has been an important space on campus. because it acknowledges that the university is on Tongva land and it can be a site for larger conversations about Indigenous issues. But we know that a single space can't carry the full weight of Indigenous presence. So how else can we indigenize the campus in terms of its physical space? In particular, how can we make Indigenous spaces on campus feel less like monuments and more like living, active parts of university life?
So I can give a super easy, let's get there real quick. Edgar kind of alluded to it. Let's finish that Tongva display case because that is our history. And I've been working on it with the university, and the design elements are all there. Everything is ready to go. So let's just do it, right? Let's get it done. And as far as you should know, the students should know that there's a faded picture of a little girl on the wall. That little girl grew up and went here. She's an alumni of LMU. Ironic, right? But that's a good thing to know, right? That's something to be proud of, that it's such a welcoming campus that we would want to come and study here. There's other elements that have been offered, I know, by our tribe, a kotumat, which is a burial, it's a funerary pole. There's other things that we can add in certain elements around the campus. And as far as infusing tribal knowledge on campus, so let's just say this campus was next to Niagara Falls. I can guarantee that every student would know the gallons of water that come out a day. They'd know the first barrel that went down. You'd have all these like fun facts. Well, why don't the students have fun facts like that? So I would say you can have a visiting professor from Cal Arts. His name is River Garza. He's Tongva. He teaches how to do murals. His murals are all over Tovangar, which is greater Los Angeles area. Have him come over, teach a class, have the students put up a wall, a mural, and then it becomes part of the culture. It becomes a placeholder. And then it's more like, hey, meet me around the Tongva mural on the left side, 2 doors down. That's where you're going to meet me, right? It becomes something that's a staple, and it's not moving. It's there.
Thank you.
My answer is going to be very philosophical. I'm going through some things at my university that's making me rethink physical space. So I have like at Long Beach, we're on Pavungna, the most sacred site, but outside of that, there's not a lot of representation. So students working on a garden for the physical space. Myself, I see my work as redefining what a physical space is. So this classroom is a physical space, but even beyond that, every single one of you sitting here are a physical space. And so when I think of how to indigenize an institution, it's creating spaces where we're not just calling, I think visiting professors and cultural bearers and residents are the start, but how do we take all of those values that those people are going to share for their residency at an institution? How do we take that and change the physical in the brain landscape of the people and the students who are making that institution run? And so for me, that's, if I had my way, there would be a Native person, but particular a Tongva person on every university's board of regents. On There would be a office like tribal relations, directly reporting to the president, no in betweens. But every single committee, academic senates would have Native representation, not to extract work from, but to actually pause and say, is this okay? And to also ask us, what do we think? And so for me, that's a way to indigenize campus that moves beyond the physical landscape. Because I think what I also worry about, because we had a bunch of oak trees planted, and that's where I want the native garden on campus. I've been like manifesting that site for 3 years now. But they put the oak trees up and then they didn't do the campus, the university didn't do anything with the community to do that. And I really just thought it was a missed opportunity because I look at that space and in my mind, I see a living lab that connects to classes that not just in American Indian studies, but actually environmental studies. It's a place where I'm a basket weaver. So it's a place where um, all the deer grass I see on East Campus Drive could get moved with the oak trees. Juncus can get planted there. And but beyond all that, it's the signs and the terms. And um, in order to make those things happen, though, our people have to be at the table to have those conversations. Um, and I say that because I'm struggling at my university, and I wrote a relational governance plan for my program. It hasn't been received well. But I see like every Tongva person I've met turns out to be related to me in some way. So we're going to find out later today how we're all related. But I really reflect deeply on like the lessons that people bring into my life, and then because I'm also I love to write. I'm a super introverted person, and I'm like this is really uncomfortable for me. But I take all those lessons and I put them into the work that I do because I recognize it's a privilege to be. It's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to hold a faculty position at Long Beach. It's a privilege to be a postdoc at UCLA. And while I'm in those spaces, I'm representing my community, and I can shift the conversation, although people don't always like to receive it. I'm like, my job is to deliver. What you do with it is that's up to you.
Hard to believe so strongly in collaboration and be introverted. I can say that from first-person experience as firsthand experience as well. Edgar, did you want to address this?
Extending the Tongva Monument, uh, there could be a mural, a plaque, uh, something that brings to light, something that brings to sight for the students here on campus to see is that there was a housing development called Playa Vista, not too far from here. Uh, that Playa Vista project disturbed thousands of years of a burial site, and that's where I'm coming from this afternoon. That burial site, there was a lot of controversy. Some of us didn't want the construction to continue, but we didn't have enough power. We didn't have enough juice to go against the city government, the developer, and those investors who developed that housing called Playa Vista. Eventually, those burial remains and the associated artifacts in those burials were reburied somewhere in the area. We can't tell you where, but they were reburied with unmarked graves. So something on campus here that extends a monument honoring those graves, honoring those people who have lived here for 3,000 years, to bring them to the forefront.
Thank you. We'd love to welcome questions from the audience for any of our panelists. Anyone have questions or comments or want to join the conversation in any other way? Charlotte?
Hi, so I'm an animator and I hope to make a show in the future that's set in the Wild West. How do I make sure to have good representation of Indigenous people in there as someone who is not personally Indigenous, and to make sure it's done in a like proper and respectful way?
What makes the West wild?
I just think of guns.
So you would go to whatever region and infusing, okay, so as a student, you're going to go from here all over the world and you're going to bring what you've learned today. That's what Francis Bacon called, knowledge is power. That's what you're bringing to the table. So thank you for that question. It's a fantastic question. So say you're doing one from LA, you would come to us and you consult and say, hey, what was that like? That's what you do. If it's in Arizona, you go to the tribes there. That's how you do what you do. Because unfortunately, again, people know their history from movies. And when you ask anybody here, again, a lot of people don't know we have Indigenous people here. And they find out, they're shocked, but they have no idea what that looks like. Oh, is it the guy with no shirt on, riding bareback on a horse? No, yeah, not really. Maybe in the plains, but not here. So that's how you get accuracy with what you're going to do. And thank you for approaching entertainment. We need good entertainment.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and thank you for answering my question.
More questions for the back there.
Thank you. I'm an Indigenous student on campus. So I really appreciate this panel and all the conversations that are happening. And I have so many comments and questions, but I'll try to limit it down to one. But as an Indigenous student undergrad, especially at a very white institution, I do find myself having a lot of challenges navigating my own identity and like this space, not only like the physical space, but also the academic space. And I was just wondering if you have any sort of comments or advice of like for somebody, an Indigenous student who is trying to, try to thrive in a place like this, especially when there's, very limited resources for Indigenous students available on campus.
What I'm going to say is going to be like, what? um, when there are not resources, you make them. You take back space. I think when I was at UCLA as a master's student, I was very fortunate to be there at the same time as my sister. She's getting her PhD. So we said that every class that we took, we were taking back a seat, and then we were going to take back a row. And if we taught a class, we were going to change the students. We recognize you can't change people unless they want to change, but it was the point of like taking back space. And I think at one point we recognized that the American Indian Student Association, while it was fantastic and it had done great work for generations, it wasn't doing enough for us. And so I want to say it was like our last 6 months on campus, we tried to start the California Indian Alliance, and we intentionally picked the California Indian Alliance because we wanted it to be called the CIA. and and so even in that space, like taking a government acronym and reclaiming it as our own. And now, she's faculty there. I'm a postdoc there. I could eventually work there also. And so we have little conversations of like, oh, we're gonna do the CIA for sure this time. But I think, now as a faculty at an institution, on my homelands, I get tired. I feel often that like my values are sustaining things and my labor is extracted, but then when it actually clicks or critiques the institution, it's like, whoa, Kelly. And so if at the end of this, um, I'll give you my card, because I'm also working through these ideas in a way that's like what sustains us during these really challenging and difficult times. And for me, it goes back to education is not a bad place or a bad thing. And I think within our own communities, it's been weaponized against us by our own people saying, oh, you think you're so smart, you're going to the university. And it makes it very uncomfortable while we're at that institution. And so I pause a lot because I'm like, well, my ancestors, I've spent a decade researching my ancestors' experiences at a boarding school. And my grandma, despite that, was always get an education, get an education. She went to every graduation. And when she passed away, I saw my graduation from Cal Poly Pomona. She marked my name because she was so proud. And so this article I'm working on talks about my wife for pushing for not even just resisting, because I don't like the word resistance. I straight up refuse to give away or sacrifice who I am because my ancestors endured that schooling experience and made it what they could so that I would never look at education as a bad thing. If anything, I look at education as, I mean, every university needs to give free tuition to Native people and, like, especially California Indians here. And so education is super, super important. And so all that's to say, keep pushing and find mentors who, when you're feeling discouraged, you can send an email and say, I need to vent, and they're going to be like, I'm here for it. Go.
Malkesh, thank you.
Samantha in the back. Yes.
Oh,
Hi, I'm in Professor Rosenthal's American West class and a history major, and we talk a lot about Native history in that class and how to, I guess, tell the stories with, complexity and nuance when a lot of times the discipline, in past years has treated it kind of like a monolith or a narrative, even if it's like a positive narrative. Oh, we should, acknowledge these people, but it's not encapsulating, yeah, like the facts and complexity and differences. Um, so I guess my question is, how would you say that, we could improve as a discipline or in academia as a whole?
We're at a deficit in our ancestors' experience because we didn't have a written language. So right there off the bat, and then boarding schools and assimilation, they stripped us of our language, stripped us of our culture, stripped us of our clothes, moved us. So my village site was right here. So you'd live here. You guys know what the weather's like, everything. And they pulled us into San Gabriel Mission. So no tools to survive there, right? There's all these little stories that unfortunately we don't have like an encyclopedia of works. So it's harder on you to get the stories straight because you're going to have to go to more resources to find them. And that's just the way it is right now. So the good work that Kelly's doing, that's going to help. And your work is just going to have to be more labor intensive to get it right. Edgar's got stories. Those stories need to be documented because otherwise we lose them and we never have those experiences again.
There was a law case that we were involved in with a corrupt and fraudulent attorney. That attorney was a graduate of Michigan State University Law School, aggressive person, intelligent. Was able. He became the CEO of our tribe, of our council. That not the whole tribe, but our the existing council. He was able to secure $21 million of investment for our council so that we could move ahead with federal recognition. But as it turned out, he was greedy, self-centered, and was wanted to control the action of the tribal council. It would be pretty cool in academia if that lawsuit could be reenacted in a classroom setting. We have all the transcripts. We are attempting to debar that attorney now because the judge ruled in our favor that he was fraudulent and that he took advantage of our tribal council. The investors took off. We never knew who they were. They just dropped out. And so we lost. We didn't lose the investment. We won. We won our dignity and we won our respect. And that attorney is pretty much in jeopardy of losing his law practice. So a class of reenactment like that would be pretty cool. I would like to, if I was a student, I'd like to attend that class.
Anthony, friend, or Parker.
Hello, and thank you for speaking to us today. My question is just a small one, but I've been interested in just watching the, especially this has more recently been in the news, times where locations in, especially the United States, have been named with their indigenous names versus their colonial names, and the kind of shift over time as, for example, Mount McKinley or Mount Denali in Alaska, and how it was finally renamed to, federally acknowledged to be Mount Denali, and then pretty recently the Trump administration overturned that and is now like federally officially Mount McKinley again. What are your opinions on that? Do you think it's important that we acknowledge native names for places in the United States, or is that kind of like, is there kind of more like we have a bit bigger fish to fry situation where it's important, but there are other ways that we should focus on, acknowledging indigenous peoples that are more important than that?
I say both names are important. And as we rename streets or in the parks, we'll have in restoration projects, we have plants, our indigenous plants. We have both English and Tongva.
I just want to say that, I mean, it's very important. I'm not one of those people who I'm an introvert. I don't go and do activism, but what I do on my iPhone is I report misnames of places. So I think eventually that's going to hit. And I haven't done it with anything Tongva, but I keep reporting the rename of the Gulf of Mexico. And so I think there are like different ways to do it. I have a very, because I'm not somebody who is gonna go scream and yell or try to do things in a very strategic, introverted kind of way. And so it's very unfortunate that we, are in the position that we're in. I don't know if this will get to the president if I called him the M word that ends with an N. But I think to get to a place where we can rename things, we first need to get an administration and a Congress that is going to be open-minded to those things. So what's more important to me, like, do I want the representation? Yes. But what's more important right now is making sure that we make changes through votes so that we are electing people who then we can go and have a conversation with and say, that's not the right name. This is what it should be called, because we can't do any of those things and make it like a long-term lasting, this is going to be forever, unless we have people who are going to be in that place, who are going to teach the person who comes after them to make those changes, and keep renaming things on Apple and Google, and like eventually it's going to go back to the Gulf of Mexico.
Thank you.
So mine is less of a question and more of a statement, but I mean, everyone in this room has been lucky enough to learn about Indigenous history through Professor Rosenthal and other classes as well. But as you look around, there's only about 30 of us in here. And my thing is LMU is as a Jesuit university, like when I came in here, a lot of what they talked about is like teaching to the whole person. And there's classes for, at least as a business major, like theology, ethics, religion, like almost anything you could think about. And it's just kind of surprising to me that there's not more of a focus on Indigenous studies, given that LMU is on Indigenous land and like their interaction with the Indigenous land and like the burial grounds that are like all around us. So I mean, that's just what I'm kind of thinking about. It's just a little bit surprising how LMU doesn't do more to push teaching about Indigenous learning.
But aren't they doing that right now? Like, this is a step, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to take, remember, life is not a sprint. It's going to be a marathon. And so as long as we're going in the right direction, my opinion, based on my interactions with this university, is they're doing meaningful steps towards the goal. And I would say that we had some questions that were posed that we could potentially talk about. And what does it look like if you infuse some fun facts into this curricula? And you brought up, the other classes that are not the core, but I'm so sorry, I can't think of them. The what? Well, no, theology and all that, but did you know, like, for you as a business major, you're going to learn about land development and so forth. Do you know in California, before you can develop land, you have to contact You have to, it's law. You have to contact the local tribe and talk to and have a consultation to find out, is there something sensitive about the land? Edgar described what happens when you don't do that, right? So what does it look like if you're in your biological sciences and you're told another fun fact? In Tongva, in our language, we do not have a word for nature. Let that sink in. We don't have a word for nature because to have a word for nature means you separate yourself from it. It becomes a different entity than yourself. So that could actually apply to philosophy, right? So if peppered in to your curricula are fun facts about the Tongva culture, I think you're hitting something, because then you're going to, again, be immersed with information, extracurricular information, so to speak.
Starting a class in Native American, of Native America here, especially of Southern California, takes it takes university to, one, develop a syllabus, develop a curriculum for that class, hire a professor that knows about the uh, history of our culture. That's one thing. That's a start. A big, a larger picture is developing a department of Native American studies, like other universities. I don't know if LMU is ready to even start a class in Native American studies and hire a professor unless the endowment that the university has is sufficient enough to do that. But that would be a start. A minimal thing would be just to have more guest speakers.
Really quick, one thing I will say is you are paying tuition here for an education, and money speaks. And so when you think about what you want to learn and what's missing from your classes, those are times to have conversations with your professor, to push them, because a lot of faculty, this is my perspective as a student and also as somebody who's like trying to get her syllabus so that I don't have to change it every semester. But that's actually not good. And so if you feel that there is something lacking in your education that's needed, it doesn't have to be going out and doing sit-ins or walkouts. It could be an email. This is what I'm thinking. So get your money's worth and ask for things, because the university, if there's enough people asking for things, they're going to divert money to where it needs to go.
And I could maybe just say a couple things about that too. I think there's a group of faculty here, some of whom are in this room, who are really dedicated to teaching on Native American issues from their various disciplinary perspectives. I don't think any of us were hired to do Native American subjects. We all came in other ways. In other words, I don't think there's ever been Chris, you can tell me if I'm wrong, a targeted hire in any kind of Native American issue. So, some of what I've heard here, faculty are interested in teaching Indigenous issues. Students are interested in taking classes. We all, like Dr. Stewart was saying, we all have to work together, I think, to tell the people who fund these things that this is something we want, to create the resources to, ultimately put together a department, put together a minor and then a major, make this a even more vibrant place. So that, Indigenous Month, Indigenous Heritage Month events are fantastic. Panels like this are so important. But I think one of the themes that we're hearing here is that we're doing a lot of early steps, and we still see these big goals out ahead of us. And that takes even more collaboration, even more organizing, and really pushing an institution that purports to hold certain values to live up to their values. And that can mean, yeah, okay, so classes are a little under enrolled for a few years, and you're just going to live with that because your values are more important than I'll use the phrase butts in the seat, right? So I think that's the task ahead of us too. Yeah. Edgar, did you want to? You had a. Yeah, okay.
Hello. Yeah, okay, I have this question because you mentioned Billie Eilish. Uh, so it has become more common for public figures to be expected to use their platforms to acknowledge historical and current injustices nationally and internationally. So I wanted to know, how can public figures use their platforms to acknowledge Indigenous people, the cultures, and the histories without it coming across as a weaponized political talking point or virtue signaling?
I think living what you believe holds volumes. And that's not just the entertainment industry, it's every industry. It's difficult, I think, for all of us to see particular issues come up, but then you find out their private life, they don't live what they speak, right? So it starts with you all. Live what you believe because someone's watching. It matters. It absolutely matters. And I can't control what people have a microphone. I have a microphone in front of my right now. I have to be really careful what I say. I have to be respectful of my kin tribesmen next to me and my tribe. So I owe that responsibility to them. I owe responsibility to you because what I say, you're going to go and tell other people. So I don't know that people, we can't control. We have a freedom of speech. So they can say and do whatever they want to say and do. I just want you to, if I could impart on you, tell the truth. In tribal community, in our culture, we don't trust people because of broken promises, lies, um, a lot, right? So we're suspicious. So for a tribally speaking, I would say that we've all had that that hurt and that the hurt that comes against us. So with Billie Eilish, she's got freedom of speech. I just think that was a moment for her to feel good. That's because she doesn't do any. She's not doing anything else in this area.
First, my nephew and I are wondering which bedroom we're going to get in Billie Eilish's house. Um,
Did you guys get? I got tons of calls from lawyers, by the way. My tribe did. On, do you want to pursue this as a lawsuit? Now, really, we're smarter than that. We know that that's just to elevate someone else, right? And those attorneys to get some spotlights. So they were going to use us again. See, oh, let's get the Indian. There's an Indian. And they don't see we're people. We're objectified once again.
Yeah, I think there, I'm big on TikTok. It's amazing. But one of the things that I saw was actually like someone complaining about our community speaking up against it. And I thought that was like crazy. The one thing I will say is like when it comes to those public figures representing, like using their platform, the most beautiful thing I have seen was the Super Bowl halftime show. And so when we look at Bad Bunny, I think people think, he's Latino, but they forget that like Puerto Rico is colonized, like all their roots are indigenous. And so when I watched the Super Bowl, I saw the most beautiful display of indigenous cultures from South America all the way through. And so I think like, and when you go on TikTok and you go and you look at like the deep analysis of the show, there's a lot of symbolism, like down to the number 64 on his shirt. The number 64 represented the original number that the Trump administration said of people who had died, and it ended up being like 2,000. And so when people do that, because he said so much without ever calling anybody a name, and he did it in a way that like spoke to every single person, regardless of the color of your skin, the food you eat. And so I think if people wanted to say, what's an example? How should other leaders in public spaces lead? They should look to someone like him, like a man who got death threats for the last few months and had to wear a bulletproof vest to the Grammys because he, like the thing he said that was like so powerful, and it's something I pull on in my own research, is love is stronger than hate. And so we want public figures who are not going to think about like, oh, like, do I appreciate someone recognizing like it's Tongva land? Yes, but also, how about you show me like a little love as a Tongva person, and rent out your house to us so that we can have a meeting or something. But at the end of the day, like I would say like Bad Bunny right now is on my list of people, of public figures who he didn't make it about him. He made it about the world and about love and in spite of his life being on the line.
And maybe some of you have taken Professor Diaz's Bad Bunny class, but I just want to put a plug in for her appearance yesterday on the PBS NewsHour, analyzing the halftime show. It's really, really fantastic. So you should check that out. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Leah.
Okay, sorry. I just have a quick question. My name is Leah. I currently work as a research assistant for the Marymount Institute upstairs on the third floor. My job is to transcribe oral histories from the women during the Marymount merger with Loyola and preserve those histories and also interview these women who were taking place in this important part of our history. In what ways can LMU began preserving oral histories of Indigenous peoples who have lived in the Playa Vista area and on the land around here?
That's a great question, and it's adjunct to the statement I made about your archives because it's flat. I mean, they're important, but it's one dimensional. It doesn't talk about any of the prehistoric history. Okay, so I would start now with interviewing the elders who were involved. Definitely Edgar, of course, but it was a lot of hurt and harms that I know our tribal community, they still haven't recovered after what they saw here in the burials. And, as we all know, we don't live forever. And that's where I would start would be to speaking with them. There is actually an interview that I gave the university of one of those kinds of interviews. They're going to be using that on the Tongva display when it gets done.
That's I love that question about oral histories, and I just wanted to mention too that one of the things I do in all my classes is to promote student research, and there are a lot of opportunities for student research that can involve both archival research and oral history projects. Um, the library did develop in a latest version of a Gabrielino Tongva bibliography in 2022 that's available now through open access, has lots of library and archival resources listed on Gabrielino Tongva history. But of course, oral history is another wonderful component. And you as students can absolutely embrace oral history as part of a project, say a research paper perhaps for a certain upper division class that you might be taking that is due later in the semester, or even as independent studies. That's another thing you can do for history majors here. We can work with you individually as faculty on oral history projects. So there's lots of opportunities as students to do this kind of work and really make a meaningful difference, and even put something in the archive through these oral histories that you do.
Oh, it's nice to meet you. I'm Aaron. I'm an animation major too, like Charlotte. And as a Black man, and I also have Native American ancestry that my grandpa tells me about, I've always been interested in my drawings. I'm really interested in having like portrayal of especially Black people in my artwork to show in my media because that's something that really lacks in today. And I wanted to know your guys' opinion on Native American like portrayal in media, whether it's like cartoons or TV shows or movies. Like I'm just very interested in that because although my grandpa knows a lot about it, I don't really know about a lot of the representation when it comes to Indigenous people.
Time to spend some time with grandpa.
Yeah.
And videotape it, right? And record it. That's really important because your ancestral journey is different than ours. And that needs to be recorded and that needs to be represented. And you can't look at one community and say, again, remember, like I said, like, oh, the Indian. Well, no, we're all different. Our tribe is very different than the Northern tribes. It's like Switzerland could never speak for Chile, right? So that's how we look at it too. And so that's why you can't put a label on things. When I went to USC, I never thought of myself as Native American. I was there, I earned my way in just like everybody else, and I worked hard. And now I get to go back and give back in a different light, right? My Native American part where they're listening, right? So I would encourage you absolutely talk to your grandpa for sure and put that representation out because nothing is black and white, right? Like we all have different stories and we all, right? Yeah.
I think also, I mean, you're all talking about like oral histories, and it sounds like that's if you're in that class, you should be doing this for your end of semester paper. My research ultimately started from an interview I did as an undergrad with my grandma on her experience in boarding schools. So those stories fill in a lot of gaps that we have in life. As far as art, I'm going to say last year there was the first Indigicon, and it was connected with Comic Con. And the only reason I know about this was because I got to sit on a panel at Comic Con that pulled in sequential art, which was a new term I learned, sequential art and basketry, because apparently basketry and the way we input our designs is sequential art. And at the time, I was working on this basket that actually tells the story of my fourth great grandmother. She's like woven into it. It has a little figure of her cattle brand, all these little things. And so Indigicon was a place that Washoyo Alvitri spoke, and all these indigenous artists and they just had I think their second one, or it's coming up. So when you're looking at like artists, because I think what I like about it is like River and Mercedes and Washoyo, they all do different types of art. And even the ones who do more like animation or graphic novels, the representation is still it's very different. And I think that it's something like as an artist, you also I love artists, and I guess I'm technically one because I'm a weaver and I've done like several exhibits, but you also have to listen to your instinct as an artist it's kind of a balance of like what calls to you, but also how are you doing it in a way that respects the stories of who you are and who you come from in that multifaceted identity. And I know that because I'm literally everything in the world except for maybe like one ethnicity. And so it's you are a very unique person walking in the world, and you can capture these stories and tell it through art in a way that you got to learn the stories though. You got to, yeah. Grandparents sometimes give you money and good food, so you should sit there.
Thank you. 100%. Thank you.
So we're nearing the end of our time here. That is the time when we will perhaps break up. We will break up to speak more informally, perhaps with if you'd like, with our panelists. But Edgar, you said you wanted to add
one
last thing you wanted to say?
challenge for this university. The federal law called Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act requires that burials, Native American burials that are disturbed, they have to be returned. In general, the law is. I'm just going to say something in general about the law. That is that those burial sites that are that are disturbed, they have to be returned to the culturally affiliated tribe of that particular burial site. California followed up on that by amending, by enacting a law called NAGPRA. NAGPRA is the acronym for Native American Graves and Protection Act. So California now requires that any institution, a university or a museum that is holding in their possession Native American burial remains, whether there's partials or intact remains, that they would be they're held in boxes, and so those remains have to be returned to the tribes here specifically us at Gabrielino Tongva. There's 3 institutions that we've found so far that have those, that are receiving state funds. 3 state universities, Long Beach, Dominguez Hills, and Los Angeles. What we need, what the Gabrielino Tongva needs is a cemetery, a graveyard, a plot specifically designed and scale to scale for our reburials. That is a challenge that we have. We don't have a reservation where we can found a graveyard or a cemetery. So I like to challenge the university this way. President of this university perhaps has influence with the archdiocese to have a Catholic church, any church, that can provide us a graveyard, a plot for the reburial. It's going to be a complex situation that involves legality. It involves zoning, and but it's a very important task for us. It's ongoing right now. We're working with Cal State Dominguez Hills right now for reburial. Those reburials cannot come, cannot be given to the Gabrielino Tongva directly because we are not a federally recognized tribe. Law, as it stands right now, the policy is that those remains go to a federally recognized tribe. So we're working with the Pechanga Indian Tribal Council to take possession of those remains that are in the institutions that I mentioned, and then we provide the ceremony. The church, the archdiocese can provide the plot. That's the challenge, Professor.
Thank you, Edgar. Thank you, all of you for this conversation. We got into so many important topics and specifics. I just want to say that broadly, very broadly, one of the things I take away from this panel is that institutions like LMU, institutions including LMU, have a real responsibility to take a Christina, I think, as you said, bold stance on Indigenous issues. That includes real, meaningful collaborations at every level of the university. That extends to things like programming and curriculum and campus spaces, of course, but also it's really about a mindset too, right? It's about having a mindset to address Indigenous issues that are consistent with our institutional values. So again, I want to thank all 3 of you and thank everyone for coming today. And please join me in thanking the panelists who I believe will be able to stay for a few minutes if you'd like to chat informally. So thank you. Thank everyone. Thanks.